My daughter-in-law told me I was living too comfortably. I was sitting at my own kitchen table, not her kitchen table, mine. The same table where I used to help my son with his homework, where I rolled out pie dough every Christmas Eve, where I had drunk my coffee alone every morning for the past 11 years since my husband passed. My kitchen, my table. And she said it like she was doing me a favor. Honestly, Beverley, for someone on a fixed income, you live pretty well. I remember looking down at my mug, the one my son had given me years ago with a painted cardinal on the side. I remember thinking, don't say anything yet. Just breathe. I had driven 4 hours from Thunder Bay to help them move into their new place in Beverley. I had brought casseroles. I had paid the first and last month's rent because my son had called and said they were a little short, and what was I supposed to say? He was my son, so I said yes, like I always did. I didn't know then that I had been saying yes for 4.5 years. I didn't know because I'd never sat down and counted. I just did it the way you do when it's your child. You don't keep a ledger. You don't keep a ledger. You just love them. It wasn't until a cold Tuesday in February that I finally sat down and counted. I had gotten off the phone with my bank. There was a flag on my account, something about unusual activity, and the woman on the phone walked me through what had been going out. Transfers, e-transfers, automatic payments I had set up, money I sent manually. She read them out in a flat professional voice, and I wrote them down on the back of an envelope because I couldn't find my notepad. By the time she was done, I had filled both sides of the envelope and started on a flyer that had been sitting on the counter. 89 transactions. In 4.5 years. The number didn't feel real at first. I sat there at my kitchen table, my coffee gone cold, looking at that envelope. 89 times. 89 times I had said yes. I need you to understand what that looks like in a life like mine. I retired from teaching after 31 years. Grade 4 and 5 mostly. I loved it deeply, and I worked hard enough that my pension is decent. Not extravagant, but decent. I had my house paid off. I had a small TFSA I'd been putting money into for years, and I had always been careful. My husband and I were careful together. We clipped flyers, we drove used cars, we took one real vacation every 5 years, and we called it enough. That's how we built what we had. So when my son called 4 years ago and said he and his wife were struggling, I helped. They'd just gotten married and moved in together. 2 incomes, no children yet, renting a 2-bedroom apartment near Innisfil. They said they were stretched thin from the wedding and the move. And I thought, all right, one time, a little push to get them started. That's not what happened. The first year, I gave them money for their car insurance because my son said his wife had gotten a minor ticket and their rate had gone up. Fine. Then there was the dental bill. Neither of them had coverage through work at the time, or so I was told. Then a laptop for her when she said she needed it for the new job she was starting. Then first and last when they moved to the bigger place. Then groceries a few times when he said things were tight. Then the gym membership she had signed up for that she asked if I could help cover for a few months. I remember the gym membership request because something about it made me pause. Not long. Just a second. I thought, that's not really a necessity. But she was on the phone, and she said it helped her anxiety, and she used a word. She called it her mental health support, and I let it go. I said yes. I didn't know then that she was also getting regular manicures, or that they had taken a trip to Vegas that October, or that she had a drawer full of things from Aritzia and Lululemon that still had the tags on. I didn't know any of that until this February. What I knew was that my son seemed happy, or at least he seemed okay. And when I called, he sounded fine, and I told myself that was what mattered. I wasn't paying attention to the way his wife spoke to me on those calls, a little clipped, a little impatient, like I was interrupting something. I told myself she was just tired or stressed, or that it takes time to build a relationship with a mother-in-law. I gave her time. I gave her 4 years. The comment about my comfortable living, the one at my own kitchen table, came about 6 months before I found out everything. I had made a small remark about maybe taking a trip to see my sister in Victoria that spring, just a long weekend, and that's when she said it. For someone on a fixed income, you live pretty well. My son was in the other room. He didn't say anything. I changed the subject. I helped them unpack 3 more boxes. I made dinner. I drove home the next morning, and I didn't cry until I crossed the overpass outside Aurelia. And then I cried for about 40 minutes, and then I stopped, and I didn't let myself think about it again. Not for a while. But the thing about something like that is it doesn't leave. It just goes quiet. It sits somewhere behind your sternum and waits. It was waiting the morning the bank called. After I got off the phone, I sat at my table for a long time. Then I took all my paper, the envelope, the flyer, and eventually my actual notepad because I went and found it, and I started organizing what I knew. I am a retired schoolteacher. Organizing information is something I know how to do. I went through my bank statements online. I went back through my emails. I found the text messages on my phone going back as far as the app would show me, and when that wasn't far enough, I found my old phone in the drawer in my bedroom and charged it up and looked through those too. Here is what I found. In 4.5 years, I had given them money for rent, utilities, car insurance, dental, their internet bill, a laptop, a television. I had paid for a television for them and I had somehow not registered that as remarkable. Groceries at least 24 times. A gym membership for 8 months. 2 sets of new tires. Her parents' anniversary dinner because she had apparently promised to pay and then realized she couldn't, a vet bill for their cat, and a handful of other things I couldn't even categorize. Things I had just said yes to in the moment and then absorbed into my life and forgotten about. 89 transactions. Somewhere around $34,000, give or take, over 4.5 years. $34,000. I had my husband's old calculator on the desk, one of those big chunky ones with the paper roll, and I did the math on it, even though my phone would have been faster because I needed to do something with my hands. I pressed the keys slowly. I wrote down the total. I sat and looked at it. The thing that hit me first was not anger. It was something quieter than anger. It was the feeling of looking at a picture that has been hanging in your hallway for years and suddenly realizing it has been slightly crooked the entire time, and you just never stood far enough back to see it. I had known somewhere that this was a lot. I had known somewhere that it had been going on a long time, but I had never seen it all at once. I had never looked at the whole shape of it. I looked at the whole shape of it now, and then I thought about what she had said at my kitchen table. For someone on a fixed income, you live pretty well. I set down the calculator and I went and washed my face. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed in the dark and I listened to the house settle and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the Vegas trip. I had seen photos on her social media. I thought about the Lululemon bags I'd spotted in their front closet when I was hanging up my coat. I thought about the way my son had sounded on our last few calls, a little distracted, a little far away, like he was listening to something happening in the other room while he was talking to me. I thought about my husband. I thought about what he would say. He was a quiet man, my husband, but he had opinions and he knew when to use them. I thought he would say, "Beverley, enough." By morning I had made a decision. I want to be careful about how I describe what I did next, because I have thought about it a great deal since, and I want to be accurate about my own intentions. I was not doing it out of spite. I was not hoping to punish anyone. That's not entirely true if I'm being honest with myself. There was something in me that knew they needed to feel the weight of what they'd been resting on. But mostly I was doing it because I was 63 years old, and I had $34,000 less in my retirement savings than I should have had, and I had been called ungracious in my own home by someone I had been quietly supporting for 4 years, and I was done. I sat down at my computer with my tea. I opened my online banking. I went through each automatic payment, each recurring transfer, each thing that had my name and my account number attached to it, and one by one I cancelled them. Car insurance, Internet. The phone plan I had apparently been contributing to, I hadn't even realized. The small monthly transfer I had set up that I had started thinking of as just a normal part of my budget. All of it. 89 transactions, and then 0. I didn't call. I didn't send a message. I didn't write an email explaining myself or warning them or asking for a conversation. I simply stopped. I closed my laptop, finished my tea, and drove to the library because I had books to return. And Thursdays are when they get new large print editions in, and I like to get there early. I will tell you what happened next, but first I have to tell you about my son. He is not a bad person. I want you to know that because what comes after might make it seem like he is, and that isn't quite right. He is someone who loves easily and follows easily and doesn't always look up until something stops him. He got that from his father, actually, that same quality of just moving forward through life with a kind of gentle inattention to what's accumulating around him. His father grew out of it. I had thought my son was growing out of it too. I had thought the marriage would settle him, that responsibility would settle him. I had miscounted on that. The first sign that my cancellations had landed was a text, about 3 days later. It was from my son, and it said, "Mum, did something happen with the car insurance? Nadine got a notice." I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down on the table, and I went to finish making lunch. Not because I was trying to be cruel. Because I needed a minute. Because the question assumed the natural state of things was that I paid their car insurance, and I needed a minute to sit with that. I texted back that evening. I said I made some changes to my accounts. Everything's fine on my end. He called the next morning. The conversation was not easy. He was confused at first, then concerned, then, and this is the part I remember most clearly, he said, "But how are they supposed to manage?" And something in me went very still when he said that. Not how are we supposed to manage? How are they supposed to manage? How are they supposed to manage? As if he had already put some distance between himself and the problem. As if the problem was his wife's problem, and he was calling me on her behalf, and I was supposed to fix it. I said, "They're adults in their mid-30s with 2 incomes. I think they'll figure it out." There was a silence on the line. "Mom." "I love you," I said, "but I'm not doing this anymore." He said he didn't understand. I said I would explain everything but not on the phone. We agreed to meet the following weekend, just the 2 of us. He would come to Thunder Bay. He came, we sat at my kitchen table. I had put together a folder, 2 sheets of paper, one with a total amount, broken down by year, and one with a list of what each payment had covered. I slid it across the table. I watched him read it. I watched his face do several things in a short period of time. He said, "I didn't know it was this much." "I know you didn't," I said. "I don't think you were paying attention." He was quiet for a long time. He kept looking at the paper. I got up and made more tea and came back, and he was still looking at it. Then he said, "She told me you offered. Most of it, she said you called and offered." I set down both mugs. I sat down. I looked at my son. "I never called and offered anything," I said. "She called me every time." I don't know exactly what happened between them after that weekend. My son is not someone who tells me everything, and I didn't ask. I know there were arguments because he mentioned it obliquely when he called, his voice careful and tired. I know things got hard in their apartment for a few months. Without what I had been contributing, they had to make real choices. Choices about what they actually needed versus what they had been treating as available. I know that Nadine's parents offered to help and that she refused, which surprised me and made me think, for the first time, that maybe she had some pride in her after all. I know that the gym membership lapsed and the streaming services got cut back, and that one of the cars was sold, the newer one I think, and they got something smaller. I heard all of this in pieces, through my son. He called more often after that, not to ask for anything, just to call. There is a particular kind of loneliness in being the person who always provides. I hadn't known I was lonely until I stopped. I hadn't known how much energy I had been spending on the low-level vigilance of always being available, always being the soft place they could fall if they overextended, always being the yes at the end of the question. When I stopped, something in me unclenched. It happened slowly, over weeks. I started sleeping better. I started thinking about Victoria again, about my sister. I went in May, just a long weekend like I'd said I wanted. My sister picked me up at the airport, and we went to a little restaurant on the waterfront and sat outside in the sun. And I ordered the salmon and a glass of white wine, and I felt for the first time in I don't know how long, purely and uncomplicatedly like myself. My son and his wife are still together. I don't know everything about their marriage, and I don't need to. I know that when I visited last fall, the first time I've been back since all of this, Nadine made dinner and she was quieter than usual. And at one point she said, without looking at me, that she'd got a promotion at work. I said that was wonderful. She nodded. It wasn't a warm conversation, but it was an honest one, and I found I could live with that. My son walked me to my car when I was leaving. He stood by the driver's door and didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at me. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Mom, for not paying attention." That was enough. That was more than enough. I drove back to my hotel, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I thought about my husband again, about what he would say now. I thought he would say what he always said when I had gotten something difficult right. He would say, "There you are, Bev," like I had just walked into a room he'd been waiting in, like he had always known I'd find my way. I opened my TFSA app on my phone. I looked at the balance. Then I closed it and I looked out the window at the city lights, and I let myself feel without apology that I had earned every single one of them. I still have the Cardinal mug. I drink from it every morning, and every morning I think about what it means to love someone well, not endlessly, not without limit, not at the cost of your own foundation, but well, carefully, with both eyes open. My name is Beverley. I am 63 years old. I live in Thunder Bay, Ontario. I was a schoolteacher for 31 years, and I stopped 89 payments before it was too late. And I would do it again. I've been thinking about what it actually costs to keep saying yes, when you should have said no a long time ago. Not the money. I've made a kind of peace with the money. $34,000 is a number I can look at now without my hands going cold, which wasn't true for a while. I mean the other cost, the one that doesn't show up in a bank statement, the slow erosion of your own sense of what you deserve, the way you start to arrange your life around other people's needs so gradually that one day you look up and realize you can't quite remember what your own needs felt like. I think about Beverley a lot, about what she knew and what she chose not to see, because there's a difference between those two things, and it matters. She knew, somewhere, that something was off. She felt it that day at her own kitchen table when her daughter-in-law looked at her life and found it excessive. She felt it every time the phone rang with another request, but knowing something and being willing to face it are two separate acts, and the second one takes something the first one doesn't. It takes honesty, not the easy kind, the kind you perform for other people, the hard kind, the kind you have to practice quietly, alone, with a calculator and a stack of old bank statements and nobody watching. That kind of honesty is an act of real integrity, looking at the full shape of what you've allowed and not flinching from it. Beverley sat at her kitchen table, and she looked. That was the beginning of everything that changed, but honesty alone doesn't move you. What moved her was something sharper, the willingness to understand, clearly and without flattery, what had actually been happening, why her son called more when he needed something, why her daughter-in-law's voice went clipped on the phone, why $34,000 had left her account without her ever quite registering the weight of it. She had to be willing to think, not just feel, to trace the pattern, to see not just what happened, but how it was allowed to happen. That kind of clear-eyed thinking is harder than it sounds when the person you're examining is yourself, and then there is the part that doesn't get talked about enough, the doing of it, Cancelling those payments wasn't a dramatic gesture. Nobody was watching. There was no confrontation, no speech, no moment of catharsis. There was just a woman at her computer on a Tuesday morning, clicking through her accounts one by one, quietly dismantling something she had spent 4 years building in the wrong direction. That kind of resolve, steady, private, unspectacular, is what I find most remarkable about her. She didn't need an audience. She just needed to be done. What happened after was what was always going to happen when the support disappeared. Nadine and Luke had built a life on a foundation that wasn't theirs, and when Beverley withdrew it, they had to find out what was actually underneath. That process was uncomfortable. It was supposed to be. Discomfort, when it comes from finally being accountable for your own life, is not a punishment. It's information. They needed that information. And Luke came back. Not immediately, not easily, but he came back. He stood by his mother's car and he said, "I'm sorry for not paying attention." That sentence matters because it was true, and because saying it required him to grow into someone who could see what he'd been part of. That growth had a cost too. Everything real does. I think the lesson, if there is one, and I'm wary of lessons that tie too neatly, is that love without limits isn't love. It's avoidance, dressed up as generosity. Real love sometimes looks like a door that doesn't open anymore. It looks like a Tuesday morning at a computer, a cup of tea, and the quiet courage to stop.